captains of industry, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning, and I think the CBN, the Bankers Committee, and the Vanguard newspapers deserve special praise for availing us of this opportunity to share views on growth ideas and initiatives. To start with, I think it will be important to address the issue of growth from two perspectives. First is the immediate and pressing need to recover from the economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The other is to bring about increased and inclusive growth in the economy. It's of course no longer news that our economy has climbed out of its second recession in 4 years, with the economy growing by about 0.11% in the fourth quarter of 2020, especially after two successive quarters of negative growth. The growth rate of 0.11%, though marginal, is encouraging because it's a V-shaped recovery with a growth of 3.74 percentage points from the previous quarter. Indeed, although growth for the full year 2020 was still negative at minus 1.92%, was far better than predicted by domestic analysts and international agencies. So we all as policymakers, lawmakers, business leaders have cause to cheer this relatively good performance, especially in the face of the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It shows what we can achieve as a nation if all of us work together with sincerity and a sense of purpose towards achieving a common objective. This encouraging growth performance owes a great deal to the early actions of Mr. President, first in providing an initial stimulus and then constituting the Economic Sustainability Committee and the Economic Sustainability Plan. In addition, direct support and easier credit terms with the proactive support of the Central Bank of Nigeria, given to individuals, households, businesses, and some specific sectors greatly helped. Let me stress, however, that we cannot afford to get carried away or let up on our efforts. For one thing, COVID-19 is still with us, and even when we overcome its economic challenges, we still have our ultimate objective of achieving sustainable, and inclusive growth to lift millions of Nigerians out of poverty. We must remember that there is still the risk of a W-shaped economic recovery, where the economy slides back into negative growth if the health outlook worsens, or indeed if we let up on our efforts to stimulate the economy. In terms of health, if the COVID-19 virus continues to mutate, or we relax our non-pharmaceutical interventions of social distancing, face masking, and hand sanitization, then we might be faced with increasing infection rates that may call for tightening of restrictions. Vaccinations as early as possible will of course help greatly in stemming the tide of the disease and its economic impact. But moving beyond the pandemic-induced crisis, I think that the first step in achieving lasting growth is to focus on productivity, value addition. We simply must encourage value addition in every aspect, in every sector of our economy. For example, in agriculture, our focus must be on processing of raw produce. Adding value, of course, means more jobs, and the value chain makes more money. Same with mining, more beneficiation. Already we've seen quite a few investments in gold refining. And of course, in gold refining in particular, a lot of what we're seeing, and a lot of the value that we're seeing that will be added to the mining of gold, obviously, has multiplier effect on our economy. Manufacturing, especially light manufacturing, is also key. We can be the factory for the continent. We've been discussing the prospects of zero taxes for machinery generally, because machines mean production in one form or the other. We must, of course, encourage investments in information and communication technologies, the creative industry, tourism, amongst others. In sum, government policy should be geared, and this is the thinking generally, to making Nigeria a value-adding economy, especially in our areas of comparative advantage. And talking of comparative advantage, Nigeria must leverage its trading talents. We have some of the greatest traders and entrepreneurs in the world, such that we can become a global trading hub. It's important to loosen generalized restrictions on trade. Blanket import restrictions are a dampener on economic activity because a lot of items that might be needed in the manufacturing process might be affected with the negative consequence or the negative impact on value addition in the economy. Importation itself is not the problem. It is what you import and what you do with it. It is value added at the end of the day that matters. And this is how jobs and wealth can be created. Many countries of the world who manufacture are huge importers, and they import far more than Nigeria. Let's take, for example, garment manufacturing. Bangladesh, the world's leading garment manufacturer, does not produce most of the cotton it uses. As a matter of fact, it grows only 2% of its annual cotton requirement. In 2019, Bangladesh imported $11.8 billion worth of textiles and apparels, while it exported $37.94 billion worth of garments in the same year. So there is every need for us to look at areas where we may have an advantage. And in those areas, we may well need to expand our import capacity. Tourism, hospitality, the entertainment sector, as we all know, suffered severely as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But these areas, these sectors, can make significant contributions to economic growth. So some of the interesting ideas coming from the Ministry of Trade and Industry, for example, involve boosting tourism by combining it with trade, such that Africans, including those in diaspora, see Nigeria as the best destination for shopping, for cosmetics, for electronics, for gadgets, for clothes, for shoes, etc. A bit like Dubai, which attracts people from all over the world and in many ways has become the shopping capital of the world. A starting point will then be the introduction of something like a national shopping month, which is one of the suggestions that they've made, so that rather than having what they call the Black Friday, a day, just one day in which a lot of shopping takes place, it can actually be a Nigerian month for shopping, tied to tourism. Another thing that we need to do promptly, and about which discussions are going on, is to combine a strategy of managing limited supplies with one of aggressively expanding the supply base. Now, this is particularly true of foreign exchange. We must address supply. Aside from moving towards a more market-reflective exchange rate, we've accepted that we need to take more dramatic steps to boost exports in order to earn foreign exchange. And in this regard, there is consensus about other urgent steps that may be required. These include the establishment and promotion of export trading houses, ensuring that companies in the special economic zones export most of their production, expanding and revitalizing the Export Expansion Grant Scheme. Recently, the President approved a 50 billion export expansion facility as part of the Economic Sustainability Plan. And this is, of course, to provide support for exporters, particularly MSMEs. Also, the removal of any existing export restrictions, the creation of special export terminals, the export promotion of non-traditional agricultural commodities such as sesame seeds, fruits, horticulture, hibiscus, cashews, and such like. All of these are crucial. Of utmost importance is that we must remove restrictions on the use of export proceeds. The way to incentivize exporters is to give them the liberty to bring their export proceeds into the economy and use as they please. In a similar context, it is clear, I believe, to government that we must find a way of moving the Nigerian digital economy into overdrive. Of course, the telecom sector in Nigeria has made giant strides, with its value growing almost 40 times from 1990 to date. The point, though, is that we still have a lot more to do. For instance, although widespread computing started less than 30 years ago, India has already managed to build its software exports from scratch to $136 billion by 2019. Similarly, the big six technology companies, as you know, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, and now Tesla, account for up to half of the value of the NASDAQ 100 and had nearly $1 trillion in revenues in 2019. By contrast, Nigerian GDP as of 2019 is just about $450 billion. So what this shows is that as a nation, we have to embrace technology and learn to use it for our own developmental purposes. The banking industry demonstrated that it could do this with the introduction and deployment of BVN, but is yet to demonstrate, in my view, the same innovative spirit in relation to fintech and mobile payments. So take, for instance, the challenge that small businesses face in assessing credit because they lack collateral. It's clear that the way to go now is the use of solutions based on artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms to determine the creditworthiness of people and entities for the purpose of lending without collateral. And we're seeing a good number of small fintech companies offering this service. And this principle is already in play in the mobile telephone sector, where it's possible for subscribers to borrow credit based on the value of their past purchases of airtime. So there's a lot to be done in that area, especially because of the sheer number of MSMEs in Nigeria and the questions around access to credit. We simply have to make access to credit easier. And of course, technology is offering us new opportunities and new vistas, and we must take advantage of them. Now, on the very topical issue of blockchain technology, digital assets, and cryptocurrencies, let me say two things. First is that there is no question that blockchain technology generally, and cryptocurrencies in particular, will in the coming years challenge traditional banking, including reserve banking, in ways that we cannot yet imagine. So we need to be prepared for that seismic shift, and it may come sooner than later. Already, remittance systems are being challenged. Blockchain technology will provide far cheaper options to the kind of fees being paid today for cross-border transfers by banks. I'm sure you're all aware of the challenge that the traditional SWIFT system is facing from new systems like Ripple, which is based on the blockchain distributed ledger technology with its own crypto tokens. So there are, of course, a whole range of digital assets spawned daily from blockchain technology. Decentralized finance, using smart contracts to create financial instruments in place of central financial intermediaries, such as banks or brokerages, is set to challenge traditional finance. The likes of Nexo Finance offers instant loans using cryptocurrency as collateral. In fact, some reserve banks are already investigating their own, issuing their own digital currencies. Clearly, the future of money and finance, especially for traditional banking, must be or is as exciting as it is frightening. But as we've seen in many other sectors, disruption makes room for efficiency and progress. Secondly, I fully appreciate the position of the CBN, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and some of the anti-corruption agencies on the possible abuses of cryptocurrencies and their other well-articulated concerns. But I believe that their position should be the subject of further reflection. There's a role for regulation here, and it is in the place of our monetary authorities and SEC to provide a robust regulatory regime that addresses these serious concerns without necessarily killing the goose that might lay the golden eggs. So it should be thoughtful and knowledge-based regulation, not prohibition, in my view. The point I'm making is that some of the exciting developments we see call for prudence and care in adopting them, and this has been very well articulated by our regulatory authorities. But we must act with knowledge and not with fear. We must ensure that we are in a position to benefit and in a position to prevent any of the adverse side effects or any of the possible even criminal acts that may arise in consequence of adopting or taking any of these options. Infrastructure is, of course, critical for increasing growth and productivity. And the Buhari administration has a track record of building roads, rail, and power projects across the country. In spite of this commitment, we're still very far away from meeting the full infrastructural needs of the economy. And this is one reason why we have resorted to public-private partnerships for the provision of infrastructure, in addition to the Road Infrastructure Tax Credit Scheme, through which private sector companies are allowed to recoup the cost of building roads from their tax payment obligations. The President has now approved the establishment of the InfraCo, which will be a public-private partnership chaired by the CBN governor to overcome our infrastructural deficits. I expect that this is a project that will excite the interest of financiers and bankers, and I encourage you all to lend support to make it a success. As we increase investment in all these areas, we must also pay attention to skills. The CEO of Apple Corporation a couple of years ago pointed out that the reason his company makes iPhones in China is not because of the cheap labor, but rather because of the concentration of high-level skills in that country. At the time he made the statement, there were over 2 million app developers in China. Undoubtedly, human capital development underpins growth beyond the benefits that accrue from having a well-educated populace. Before concluding, let me emphasize that in order to engender sustained growth, we must think in terms of scale. I'm quite concerned when I hear that national interventions are classified as pilots, involving sometimes no more than 1,000 people, or such small-scale interventions. Given the size of our population, we simply cannot afford the luxury of pilot projects. We should design our interventions very carefully and then go big. And really, this is the way that our financial institutions must also think in terms of supporting government projects. It was quite puzzling to me when people said that our plan to build 300,000 houses under the Economic Sustainability Plan was too ambitious a target. After all, when you look at it, this is just 400 houses per local government. Yet many of our local governments are larger than some African countries. Who would not consider building 400 houses in 1 year as an onerous task? And I do appreciate the reason, of course, why 300,000 may be considered daunting. Obviously, there are capacity issues, there are even issues around absorbing, some of the implications of building in that way. But the truth is that the task of national development requires that we fire on all cylinders. We simply have to think big and look at how and ensure that we develop the capacity to implement the big things, the projects on scale. After all, at one stage, China was building 1.9 million housing units per year over a number of years. Let me end by restating the obvious, that the banking sector has a crucial part to play in promoting increased and inclusive growth in Nigeria. And I take this opportunity to commend first the Central Bank of Nigeria for the forward-looking support for growth-related initiatives, especially under the Economic Sustainability Plan. The banks also for their patriotic contribution to sustaining growth in the country by creatively accommodating their clients, especially those that face difficulty at the height of the pandemic. You should nevertheless go further to deepen the provision of patient or long-term capital that would allow businesses to grow over the long term. Some of you have shown this spirit with regard to providing finance for programs in the Economic Sustainability Plan, but we can certainly do a lot more in this regard. I know that you're in business to make profit, but I'm sure you don't need anyone to tell you that you will make a lot more if the financing of investments promotes growth. I wish you very fruitful deliberations during the rest of this summit. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.